Marcus didn't return to his car right away. He stood behind the glass door of the library, watching the two figures outside the cemetery. No one saw him. No one knew he was there, holding his father's sermon book, staring at the shovel filling the dirt, at the black bag placed beside the unmarked grave. His instincts told him that the contents of the bag weren't dog ashes, as they'd said. And those hands filling the dirt, the ones that had blessed the pulpit, were now hiding their sins in silence. He couldn't leave, not now. Marcus walked out of the church, still holding the book, Robbie's communion bag in the other. It was quiet, but his steps on the lawn were tense. "Good evening," he said as he approached. Harold and George turned, startled, their eyes wide with fear. In the pale twilight, their faces were tense, sweat beading their foreheads despite the chill in the air. "Marcus," Harold stammered, his voice higher than usual. "What are you doing back?" "I left my father's sermon book in the library," Marcus replied, walking slowly but steadily. "I also came back to get a mass for a boy in the hospital." His eyes moved away from them, lingering on the black bag. Then he looked at the shovel in George's hand. "So, what are you two doing here with that shovel and bag?" George tightened his grip on the handle of the shovel. Harold glanced at him and spoke first. "It's just, we're moving an old dog grave, a pet grave, to make room for future burials. You know, the churchyard is getting full." Marcus said nothing. He looked up from the ground to the bag, then into their eyes, a long, direct look. "That bag seems strange to me. It's not like a cremation bag. I help my father bury people. I know the smell of dirt, the weight of lies." George swallowed. Harold clenched his fists, his voice shaking. "Marcus, don't get me wrong." But Marcus had already reached down, too quickly for anyone to stop him, and unzipped the bag. Two dusty books fell out before he could catch them. Marcus recognized them at once. The 1977 sermon notes, his father's personal diary. He stood frozen, a lump formed in his throat. "You hid them," he whispered. "You wanted to throw them in the river, the way you threw my father in the ground and preached salvation." A sudden flash of red and green light appeared on the hilltop. Sirens wailed through the silence. Police headlights illuminated the clearing. George screamed, dropped the shovel, grabbed the bag, and ran. "Stop!" Marcus shouted, but George was already running, not toward the church but toward the woods, through the trees, over the slope. Marcus followed without hesitation. "Stop, George!" he shouted, but the old reverend was still running, his arms wrapped around the bag like an unwashed soul. They approached the edge of the cliff, an old cliff where Marcus had once stood to watch the sunrise with his father. Now it was the stage for the final truth. George stood on the edge, the bag threatening to fly from his hands. "You don't understand," he shouted, his breath ragged. "Your father wanted to destroy us. He wanted to expose everything in front of the congregation." Marcus stepped forward slowly. He held out his hand not to stop, but to invite. "You can still stop, George. Give me the book. Give me my father." But George didn't listen. He turned away, arms outstretched like a false martyr. "I can't live to see that day, not stand before everyone and say, I killed the only black minister in this town for money." And he fell, but he didn't hit the ground. Two police officers, just in time, grabbed his arms before he fell. George screamed, struggled, but was pulled back. "Not today," one officer said, holding his arm. "Today you will pay before the court. Before the people, before the son of the man you killed." Marcus sat in the interrogation room for the next 3 hours. Beside him sat Detective Miller, his eyes as sharp as knives but as gentle as a mother's. On the table were two books. A black bag covered in mud, a part of a skull, the remains of ashes, and a shovel. Marcus pointed to each object, nodding in affirmation. His hands shook as he touched the sermon book, the last book his father had ever written that had taught him right from wrong, truth from falsehood. When they opened the diary, the words were still faintly visible. "Can't keep quiet anymore. I found the cash register short by more than $10,000. I confronted them, but Harold and George denied it. I prayed every night, but God was silent. If they don't confess to the congregation, I will have to do it next Sunday." Marcus read, each word cutting into his heart. "My father didn't run away," he said, his voice choking. "He was killed for telling the truth." Detective Miller nodded. "And it was you, your determination, an old notebook, and a boy in the cemetery that we found out." Marcus sat still. He didn't cry. He just clasped his hands together, and for the first time. A week after the secrets were exposed, the atmosphere in the small Arkansas town had changed. No more vague rumors about Pastor Elijah Freeman. No more pitying glances for Marcus, the son who had spent 2 decades surrounded by doubt, silence, and a nameless sadness. Now everyone knew the truth. The funeral of Pastor Elijah Freeman was held on a warm, clear Saturday morning. In front of Mount Olive Missionary Baptist Church, where he had preached with all his heart, a simple wooden plaque was erected. "Welcome home, Pastor Freeman." Marcus stood there, wearing his father's old suit, next to the urn with a wooden cross. A crowd gathered around. Some were old church members. Some were locals hearing for the first time about the first black pastor in the area who dared to challenge the church's financial injustice in the mid-1970s. Detective Miller was there too. She wasn't in uniform, just standing quietly in the back row, hands clasped, head bowed. She knew justice had come, but late. In the front row sat Robbie, the boy Marcus had met at the cemetery, next to his aunt and uncle. He wore a loose white shirt, his hair neatly combed, his eyes fixed on the wooden platform where Marcus was slowly walking up. Marcus stepped into his father's pulpit where he had once stood. For the first time in 25 years, he was not just coming to church as a seeker of truth, but as someone carrying his father's torch, continuing to light the way for righteousness. He opened his father's sermon book. His voice rang out both soft and firm. "If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between the two of you. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother back." Matthew 18:15. He paused for a beat, then continued, not reading, but speaking his own words. "I blamed God. I was angry with him for a quarter of a century. I used to think if he really existed, why did my father, a righteous man, disappear without saying goodbye? Why did my mother die alone, and I grew up with a frozen heart? I was wrong. He didn't leave me. He just waited for me to come back." A sob rang out somewhere. No one tried to hold back their tears. "It was from a feverish boy abandoned in a cemetery that I found compassion. From a forgotten notebook that I found truth. And from truth, I found my father." Marcus stepped down from the podium and approached the coffin. "Father," he said softly, "I'm sorry for doubting, and thank you for never stopping believing in what was right, even when it cost me my life." He gently placed his hand on the coffin, bowing his head in silence. A choir sang behind him, the song that Pastor Elijah had chosen for every end-of-life service. "Amazing Grace." The funeral ended. The crowd dispersed, but no one left in a hurry. Many people quietly approached Marcus. Some took his hand, some just touched his shoulder and nodded. No words needed to be said, their eyes spoke for themselves. Robbie approached, still holding the small piece of paper, the prayer Marcus had written for him at the hospital. "Marcus," the boy whispered, "I read this every night. I pray for your father and for my mother." Marcus bent down and hugged the boy. Not like a hero, but like a lost man who had found someone to walk with. "You know," Marcus whispered, "God used you to bring me back." Robbie smiled brightly. "So, what else can God use you for?" Marcus smiled, the first time his smile didn't have a shadow. "A lot. But let's start with you being a student, shall we?" The boy nodded enthusiastically. 2 weeks later, Marcus agreed to preach the first Sunday service at Mount Olive since the incident. He didn't call himself a pastor, he was still Marcus, but his sermon that day opened with the words his father had once written. "The truth is not just a sword that cuts through the darkness. It is a light that quietly penetrates the cracks of lies, until the whole room can hide nothing." And he ended with a line he had written himself. "When we think faith is dead, it may just be the seed that is quietly sprouting underground." Life always begins in the darkness. A month later, Marcus held an official gravestone unveiling for his father, right on the church grounds where his ashes were reinterred with reverence. The simple headstone read, Rev. Elijah Freeman, 1935, 1977. He told the truth, he paid the price, and he never gave up on grace. Marcus laid a bouquet of white flowers before the grave. Beside him sat Robbie, clutching the Bible Marcus had given him. "Marcus," Robbie whispered, "do you believe in God now?" Marcus did not answer quickly. He looked up at the sky. A white cloud drifted by, sunlight filtering through the oak trees beside the cemetery where his father's ashes had been buried for 25 years. "Yeah," he said softly, "I do. It's not because it's easy. It's not.